These entities, once benevolent and forward-thinking in their creation, have devolved into self-serving mafias that place their own profits, survival, and legacies far above the interests of the people that they serve.
So I think it was in one of the first 4 sessions when I talked about how a trip to Korea made me ponder the question, why do we always need to build more buildings? Yeah, so that question led to the main idea of the book, and here we are, and it was a couple episodes ago, if you remember. But yeah, that's where one of the main themes comes from, talking about institutions. Because even though a building is a perfect physical metaphor for the subconscious desire many of us as humans have to live forever, but then I began to think, why stop there? Because buildings, although they are very visible objects, they aren't the only thing that people make, in order to achieve a sense of immortality. Not by a long shot, right? I mean, what about a book? What about a painting, a song, a stuffed animal, a journal? Any of these things could serve that purpose. I think we all do those things because we hope long after we're gone that somebody can still appreciate them, and by way of appreciating that thing, whatever it is, they appreciate us. So anyway, that led me to think about institutions as a whole. And when I say institutions, I'm referring to any large entity formed by a collective group of people. An example would be the military or the education system, or even the institution of family, like just individual family units. Because those things that I was talking about that we create, the books, the songs, the journals, whatever, when we do that on a collective scale, now, not always, but we're starting to form an institution around it. So these are entities that, although they lack physical form, they surely exist in some form within the minds of most people within a society. When you think about, just a typical family structure, that, most people have an idea. When you say family, people have an idea, something pops into their head. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. So I began to think about how the nurturing and sustainment of these institutions influence us as people and our planet as well. This was one of the main themes that I wanted to explore in Cereus Limnic. So, as I explained in one of the earlier episodes or sessions, the story of the novel is really one of differing perspectives. Several characters look at one thing from a variety of viewpoints, and as the story plays out, many decide they don't like what they see and they fight to change it. That's a very stripped down summary of the book right there that I just gave. But you may ask, why focus on institutions? Well, I decided to focus on them because if you think about it, the role that various institutions play in our lives dramatically influences who we are as people and how we live our lives. In a lot of ways, they influence the quality of our lives, right? So, what I'm saying here is, take for example a typical baby born today in almost anywhere in the world. How is their life going to play out as they grow up? Well, I'll tell you typically how it plays out. They'll be born into some type of family unit, even if it's, divorce or whatever. They're born to something. Somebody claims that baby. The family is usually the first institution that most of us encounter. The family and the community, whether that's the environmental community, the ethnic community, or the social community, or a combination of all of those things. We are born into some type of social order. Then after some years pass, they'll go to some kind of schooling. This is usually the second institution that we encounter. This lasts for many years, possibly until the child grows up and completes secondary or even college education. I've talked about that in a previous episode. So after the schooling period ends, they typically join the institution of some type of workplace in order to make a living. No matter what their chosen vocation is, they will most likely work for somebody, even if it's for themselves, right? If they become an entrepreneur or freelancer or something like that, you still got a boss, right? Your boss is just everybody instead of like a physical person. Then maybe they decide to have a family, then the whole cycle starts over again, right? So my point is, as we encounter and become involved in these various institutions throughout our lives, we form kind of an unspoken contract with them. So what I mean about this contract is that in exchange for the protection, knowledge, or whatever benefit the institution provides, we often, unknowingly and unwittingly, become ambassadors and sometimes advocates for the institution. So, you go to a good school, you tell people about that school, and people are like, oh, you went to the Air Force Academy. That sounds cool. You tell them, I was telling some of my students the other day about some of my college experience, and some of them were pretty interested in it. So now they know about the Air Force Academy, and then maybe they want to go there or something like that. So that's kind of how it works. That's just one example. So in other words, our participation helps to tell others about that institution, like my example with the Air Force Academy, which in turn sustains it and keeps it alive and growing. So I'm sure some of you are probably like, what's the point of all of this? Well, the point is, most institutions, whether it's education, a tech corporation, a small business, or even a country, were created to serve a particular purpose. Those purposes vary, but what happens when an institution becomes so old, so prolific, that it loses the memory of its original purpose? Now you have an interesting problem. Instead of existing to fill a collective need, the institution has devolved and now only exists for the sake of existing. Or to bring it full circle, it exists because key stakeholders or participants who are already deeply fond of the institution wish to achieve immortality, here comes the immortality, and live forever through its continued existence and operation. This may be in spite of the fact that the institution is corrupt, internally broken, guzzling resources or wasting them, or no longer achieves its intended purpose in a sustainable way. I know it's kind of deep. And you should know, if you've been listening to a few of these sessions now, you should know kind of the way I can think. But this is what I wanted to comment on by writing Cereus Limnic. So I ask you now, we're at the time of this recording, we're about exactly 2 weeks away from the general election. So, of course, I'm thinking about this question. What is America? When you turn on the news or you ask, depending on who you ask that question and where they live at, if you ask a person in each of the 50 states and outlying territories, you would probably get a pretty distinct answer about what is America. Some people's view of this country is deeply rooted in the tradition and what is considered universally American. Football, hamburgers, hot dogs, driving insanely long distances. I didn't appreciate that until I went overseas and I realized, man, y'all don't drive for hours and hours and hours, especially growing up in Texas. You're just used to driving a lot. That's just me. But anyway, those things that I said, driving is a big part of the American experience. All those things I mentioned, that's America. For others, America represents a promise at a chance for a better life, something they may not have had wherever they came from before. So I guess what I'm saying is, my point being that the effectiveness of the institution that is America has clearly been shaken in this year, in 2020. I don't have to name it off. Everybody, whenever we start talking about it, or anybody that I know, we start talking about it, everybody just refers to it as everything that's going on, right? But, when they say that, they mean COVID, they mean social and political unrest, they mean millions of people losing their job, they mean the economy taking a dip, they mean losing opportunities, losing wages, possibly losing loved ones. And I've personally seen how all of these things that I just named have contributed to a kind of social cynicism and malaise that many in this country share right now. I mean, including me on some days. So the election, obviously, every election is important, but, the outcome of this election is it's going to write the story of how the next step that America takes outside of all of these things, whether we, race toward a cure for COVID or some type of vaccine or whatever, or how we address the many social issues that we have in this country. I mention America because it seems like we've hit a point in this country's history where, in many ways, we've forgotten the original purpose of forming this more perfect union. A time in which significant numbers of people either cling to the old ways and beliefs for what was traditionally American, and those who have no idea anymore what America as an institution means to them. Many people have become, I just talked to this about this with my brother briefly yesterday. A lot of people have become bystanders, simply waiting to see how things play out, which does nothing for those who are dependent on a functional and healthy institution in order to live their lives and have a true shot at the pursuit of happiness. I'm using some using those words because it's true. Those are the reasons why the founder put those types of words in there, because it's like it meant something probably different a little bit, like pursuit of happiness. There's a lot more encapsulated in that nowadays than probably it was in the founder's days, but you know what I mean. The only way I've known for a faltering institution to correct its course is for it to evolve. It was like that when I was in the military. If there was a failing unit, it was like, hey, get rid of him or her, that commander, change out a lot of the people. You're going to do all of these exercises until things get right. And I kind of have that mentality when I think of institutions that have kind of lost their way. True evolution can be merciless in its culling and preening of species and traits. It also can take a hell of a long time that, I would argue that we kind of don't have right now, because we have people that need help now, today. But purposeful and intentional, I will say this, purposeful and intentional evolution, the kind that only we can do as human beings, can also be very powerful if handled in the right ways and executed in the right ways. That's what we need now. To look outside of ourselves and our immediate situations, to imagine and build a country and society and institution that, while it may not be familiar to us, works better and fulfills us now and in the future. We need that now more than ever. And it seems like it's going to, more and more every day I think about it, it's going to be everyday people like me that build it. I'm not saying that I'm going to be the savior of the country or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, you who is listening to this, and obviously if you're a U.S. citizen and you can do something, whatever it is you do that thing. That may not seem like much, but on some days it's just enough. We need people to go to work. We need people to show up. We need people, obviously, to vote. Please vote if you haven't. And yeah, that's how we're going to fix this institution of America. Just my 2 cents.
Music for the Cereus Limnic podcast was provided by Ryan Fonger. For more information about Cereus Limnic, visit keithhayden.net and subscribe or follow at @KH_author on Twitter. For future episodes, subscribe and follow the Cereus Limnic podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, as well as the Amazon Music app.